Hey Freunde, dieser Podcast wird unterstützt von der Freikirchenbank in Bad Homburg. Wir durften als City Church im vergangenen Jahr eine Finanzierung erfolgreich umsetzen und dürfen jetzt in unserem eigenen Gebäude sein. Wenn du als Gemeinde, als Freikirche oder als christliche Organisation ein Projekt hast, dann ist die Freikirchenbank ein genialer Partner, ein super Partner, der dir hilft in der Planung, in der Umsetzung mit viel Erfahrung, mit einem großen Netzwerk, Gottes Auftrag zu erfüllen, und sie reichen dir die Hand dabei, diese Schritte umzusetzen, und wir sind wirklich begeistert davon, mit ihnen zusammen unterwegs zu sein. Hey Freunde, herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge von Let's Grab a Coffee. So cool, dass du wieder mit dabei bist. Vielen Dank auch für euer Feedback in den letzten Wochen und Monaten. Auch in Zukunft, wenn ihr Anregungen habt oder Fragen oder auch Themen, auf die ihr Lust habt, dann schreibt uns gerne. Wir sind echt dankbar für jeden, der sich mit uns connectet. Die heutige Folge wird auf Englisch sein. Deswegen, wenn Englisch für dich eine Herausforderung ist, dann geh doch auf YouTube. Dort werden wir die ganze Folge auch mit Untertiteln versehen. Und so kannst du die Session dir einfach anschauen. Ansonsten wollen wir jetzt unsere Freunde vorstellen aus Singapur und freuen uns einfach auf den Austausch mit den beiden. So, we're going to switch into English. Welcome, Christian and Fifi from Heart of God Church in Singapore. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Yes.
We've just been together for a week at our conference.
Yeah, that was.
How have you finding it so far?
It was amazing. When I'm a Swiss, but I've lived in Singapore for more than 20 years. So I told everybody, hey, when we go to Germany, okay, don't expect the Germans to be very warm and outgoing and welcoming, like, Germans. They have a good heart. But I was so surprised. Everybody was so nice, so warm. I mean, I'm not sure how you experienced it, but
It's my first time in Germany, actually. And after Christian's briefing, we were like, okay, we look in their hearts. The good news...
in their eyes.
Yeah, don't look in their face, just in the hearts. The good news is that we loved all the faces after that. But we were so won over by everyone's warmth and how much they just were simple and they love God. So we love it so far. Yes.
It's been so good to learn from you guys. And what are some differences between Singapore and Germany? Have you found anything that you kind of spotted that is different?
The food.
The food?
the weather. Yeah, here you have 4 seasons. In Singapore, we only have 3 seasons.
Okay.
It's hot, hotter, and hottest. And
so no snow in Singapore?
no snow, no.
Minus temperatures?
Nope.
No.
Never.
No.
Yep.
Only in the fridge.
In the freezer.
Yeah, in the freezer, yeah.
And the food is different?
It's different. Singaporean food is full of different culture, but it's very heavy. It's a lot of spices. I must say, when it came to Germany, all the food was a little bit less spice. It's good for now, but I'm not sure I can survive beyond a week for this.
So you want some...
I want something like spicy. I want something stronger. Yeah.
I love all the drinks here in Germany.
I'm not going to ask what drink those are.
Yes. Yeah, it's so good, guys, to have you here. And we want to talk a little bit about the church that you are from, Heart of God Church in Singapore. And maybe you can give us a quick journey of each of you. How long have you been part of that church, and maybe what your role is currently in the church? Maybe we start here. You want to start, Fifi?
So I've been in this church since 2003. So it's about 20 over years. And I came when I was 17. Right now, I'm a full-time staff, and I'm basically, the important role is called the Director of Global Relationships. But basically, my role is to wine and dine people. I basically make friends with everybody outside of Singapore. And we have a team of people that looks after all the things we do globally. Yeah.
Well,
for me, I met Pastor Ha and Pastor Leah like many years ago, like 23 years ago. We were going to a conference, and I happened to sit on the bus next to them. And I thought, like, these are really nice people. So it was this couple from Singapore, and they told me about the church. The church was about 100 people. Then I went to Bible school, and I fell in love with a girl. And she said, from the church, and she said, yeah, you're a cool guy, and I kind of like you too, but I will never leave my church for you. So I moved to Singapore and joined Heart of God Church in January 2004. So it's been 20 years. It's been amazing to see. The church was like 200 people. I saw all these young people, teenagers, leading connect groups, preaching, reaching out to their friends, and I loved it. And of course, over the 20 years, I saw the church growing to where we are today. But the heart is still the same. It's young people, it's non-Christians. We are reaching out. And so what do? Well, I do a couple of things. part of the preaching team. Like Valerie, I'm also looking after all our international friends, a couple of other things, but that's kind of the main stuff that I'm doing. Yeah.
Okay. And how big is the church now? Just to get a picture of it, like you said, like a couple of hundred when you started going to it.
200 when I started going. We are now about 5,000, and the special thing is,
jump.
Yeah, I always tell people it's because when I joined, they started to grow, but it's not true. It's not.
You said earlier you were the only, the first or the white person.
First white person that walked into our church, and we were all young. We're like, oh my gosh, there's a white person in our church.
Yeah, I was a zoo exhibit.
Yeah.
That's like, see the white tiger.
Expensive one, the expensive.
Yes. But now we are about 5,000 people, and the average age is still 23 years.
Yeah.
Old. Yeah.
So we're just slightly above the average age.
Yeah, slightly.
2 years above.
Yeah, 1 year.
Yeah, that's great. So I think this is one of the most fascinating thing about Heart of Church is this whole idea of this generation theme. You know, there's a book called Generations. I'm sure we're going to link it in the show notes. I've read it myself. You know, I met Pastor Lear, I think in March at the Learning Community. I think it was this year in March, and then you know, last week as well. Maybe for some listeners that have never come across that concept, when you hear that generations, what are some of the first things that come to mind? Why is it so much at the core of Heart of God Church? Generations.
All right. Why is it so much core of Heart of God Church? I think Pastorin Lear, she kind of chanced on a secret. She always tells the story like the church was about 100 people, and she had like 9 kids that were not really kids anymore in children's church, but these 9 were also not adults. So they looked so bored during the children's service. She always says these were the 9 stones because their faces couldn't smile, they couldn't worship. It's like so. But then she thought, if I don't do anything about them, I'm going to lose them. They are going to leave the church. So she started the youth ministry. And so these 9, they became the worship team. They became the connect group leaders. They became the evangelists. And out of the 9 came Heart of God Church as we know it today. And so we realized that when you invest into young people, they step up to the challenge. They take leadership. They build the church. And they do it with so much passion that, so now generations, it just means that every 3 years, we are going after a new generation of young people. Sometimes in the business world, you say we go from one generation to the next. And what they mean is the father started a business, handing it over to the son.
Exactly.
But how it works in the church really is that we invest into a new group of 12 and 13-year-olds. And then 3 years later, we go to the next group of 12 and 13-year-olds. So that's what we mean with a generation. And every generation, they have their own leaders. They have their own people that do things in the service. So we are now at about 7 generations, right, over the last 20 years. And
Yeah.
Well,
And just to add, I think one of the things that Pastor Leo always says is generations are reinforcements, not replacements. So one of the things that we do in our church is we believe every generation can serve together in the church, and we bring different strengths and different things into the church. You see, for me today, if you talk to me, I'll think that Backstreet Boys is still cool. Have you heard of Backstreet Boys? Yes. So I would think Backstreet Boys is, yeah. So I would think, and I'll try to introduce music like that into the church. But if you ask a Gen Z or a Gen Alpha right now, they'll be like, that's old. Yeah, that's in the oldies radio channel. So they bring a fresh thing to the church, and that's what makes our church relevant to the young people as well. But yet the older people in our church, we also want them to be involved. So they bring in their wisdom, they bring in their experience into the church. So when we say generations, we're actually seeing different generations of people bringing their strengths, bringing in their flavor to the church. So in our church, the fun thing is that in one ministry, you could have someone who's 6 to 7 years old serving together alongside with someone who's 70 years old, and they'll be serving together in the same service. So the kids don't go to kids' church. They join us in the main service to serve together. So that's for us in our church.
yeah, and I think that's very unique in a way. And been learning and trying to, rethink even the way we do church. And because I think most churches have those departments, you have like the kids church in that room over there, and you have the youth, please don't be too loud. And then you have the adult church, but for you guys, it's all in one.
Yes.
And there is no separate departments.
Yes.
And I think that's really fascinating, because even seeing some of the videos and pictures of those young people serving alongside someone else is truly something that is like, it just reflects life so much more, I think,
So true.
So you said 3 to 3 years is one generation?
3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years is one generation. So when you grow up, then you always try someone younger to be put into place. So your own preferences then of Backstreet Boys, you have to somehow let go of some of that in order to allow something new to come in. Is that difficult, or is it just the natural way of, all right, that's the way I did it and now I have to do it as well? Or because sometimes I feel like we're a bit like, oh no, I just do this now.
Well, I think how it works is really the heart is always for the next generation, for the younger people. And I think that is something that we always communicate, we preach about it. One of Pastor Hao's favorite scriptures is in Malachi, when it says, and in the end times, the hearts of the fathers will turn to the children, and the hearts of the children will turn to the father. And it's the fathers first that turn their hearts to the children. And I think that is the heart, the value system that runs through every single area in our church, that we are always for the next generation. We are always for younger people. Every ministry is always trying to create positions that the younger people can fulfill. And sometimes when I speak to pastors in Europe, and not Germany, maybe Switzerland, they always ask, the system, give me the process, give me the thing that I can apply. And we always have to go back first, that the most important thing is your heart. You need to have a heart that makes room for the next generation. And of course, sometimes they play songs in our service that I'm going like, wow, I've never heard this song. So yes, is it uncomfortable? Certainly. Sometimes it is uncomfortable, but it's for the next generation. Yeah.
So I think also on the same note, there are occasions where the preferences of different generations come in. So recently, for example, in Easter, one of the new things we tried Easter this year is we tried to have different styles for different services. And the styles, we don't do it by demographics or age, but we do it by your vibe and the style you like. So we had, for example, one service that's a bit edgy. You have DJ playing the music, and you have the dark lighting. So that's one kind of service. And then we have another service that we call it family friendly. So it's a very wholesome. We have very wholesome talks. That's a different service vibe. And then we had another one that could be like more celebratory. So it wasn't really necessarily based on age, but based on your preference, you could choose one. But the reason we did that was it was really for the new believers. It wasn't for many of us in the church. We knew that, hey, it's not just about my own preference, but what does my friends like? What does the younger people like? And then we try to find the services that fit them.
That's great.
Yeah.
Experimenting.
So you could bring the friends to the service that you think like, hey, my friends, they will fit into this service. Yeah.
Yep.
At our conference last week, in one of the business sessions, we had a recent survey of our churches in Germany, of the Pentecostal denomination. And I think the number was around 1,000 people, 1,000 churches belong to the BFP denomination. And the average age is 55, which is quite high. If you compare it, for example, to your church, or even to our church. We are a church plant and we're only 9 years old, so we're still fairly young. But if that's the case for the average church, I would love to drill into it a little bit, the conversation that you've had in the past, maybe with someone that is 55. What's the journey of someone that is maybe in the older generation? We even met a couple at the conference, amazing couple, so sweet. I mean, it was amazing to listen to them. And they were close to
60s, 65,
yeah,
60s.
Late 60s, yeah?
Yeah.
Late 60s. So how do you take them alongside? Like, how do you involve them and not push them out when maybe some of the topics are not so much relevant to where they are in life, but for some reason, when I listened to them, the heart was really on fire for the church and for the next generation. And I was like, wow, does it happen naturally or intentionally? Like, how does someone who's older and maybe looks for something different initially then thought, oh no, this is exactly right to go in that direction?
Firstly, those that are not good, we invite them to another church. Just kidding. No, I think that for many of them, firstly, we always thought, or we told our church that we are not just about young people, but we are a whole youth church together. And no matter how old you are, you can play a part to do something for the young people. So for many of the older people, I would say that there would be some that feels that this is not for me. And we are fine with that because every church has a different calling. Every church has a different call. So there are some older people that just says, I want something for myself and maybe I should find somewhere else. But there are those that choose to stay in our church. They find ways to serve and build the young people. And the great thing about our church is that when we started 20 years ago, we have many couples that they were giving financially to the church and they believe that that was the place where their young people can grow up in. Up till today, those couples are still in our church 20 years later. They are now much older, but they see that their roles is still to support the young people. And it gave a lot of our young people a very good picture of what it's like to grow up and grow older, but still being part of a church that is supporting young people. So even for people like the couple you met, they first came to our church because their daughters came and they were used to be from a different church that they saw their kids not so on fire or involved. But when their kids came to our church, somehow they seemed to love church a little bit more. And that's where they realized themselves that, hey, if my kid can be like that, how powerful it would be if all of my friends' kids would also experience the same thing. So I think for them, they saw that, hey, I have experienced it myself, and I want to help other parents have kids that go through this with God as well. So they found their own way, and so there's a whole community of older people in our church. We hide them at the back. But there's a whole community of a few hundred of them, but they've been really, really supportive.
Maybe I can just add on one more thing, and that is, now an older person, we know they have needs, and we also want to address their needs. So we are not just only about young people. So we've worked with a Christian clinical psychologist, and we came up with all these courses. We call them the life skills courses, so that we can address the needs of the older people. So we have parenting courses with a psychologist, Christian perspective, finance courses, mental resilience courses. We talk about money. We talk about all these things. So the older people, we do address their needs as well. And for me, I do lead some of the family people, and I realized one thing, and that is when the families, when they have children, sometimes I go to them and say, hey, wouldn't you think that, a church that is not so focused on young people, it might be better for you? And they go, no, of course not. They realize that you and I, older people, we can be Christian anywhere in the world. If today you would be sent alone to China, to America, to Africa, you would still read your Bible and you would still do your quiet time. You would still pray. But we have realized that teenagers, they need their friends to be on fire together. They are like, yes, they can believe in Jesus, but having revival, they need the friends. We are doing this together. We are reaching out together. So the families will say, hey, don't ever change this into an adult church. I need my children to grow up with other young people. So I think they see that, wow, there's so many reasons for us to stay a young church.
Yeah. I think it was one of the sessions that, maybe the first one even, that our leader, like Pastor Friedhelm did, and he talked about mental illness. And you remember how he said like 50% of all mental illnesses happen to people before they are 15.
Yes.
And then he went to 75% of mental illnesses happen to people before they're 25.
Yeah.
So, and then he even asked the question of who became a Christian under the age of 21, I think.
Yeah, so yes.
And almost the entire room, there were 2,000 pastors.
Yes. Almost.
The entire room raised their hand.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, this is incredible. If we don't focus on that, we're really missing the mark of getting a relevant church for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
it's the same in Singapore, that we also have majority of people that really get saved and are much younger as well. So I think what you have in your church here, you're really reaching a lot of young people that needs to see the light in the midst of all these things that's going on. So it's great.
I mean, just to add on to this, and so this online world, please don't crucify me for saying this, but if you just would think, like, I also, one of my hobbies is I run a company, and when you look at this, right, 75-80% of people, they receive Jesus below the age of 20. So where should your entire budget, where should your entire focus go? In the business world, we go to the market that we can close, we can convert. That's where we focus on, that's where we go. But it seems like the church world is ignoring the statistics. The people most open to the gospel is below 20 years old. And when you just think a bit more strategically, you need to go there. That's where you are successful. That's where the gospel falls on hearts that are more open. And so I'm not saying you need to change your vision, but I'm just saying, hey, let's use common sense. And yeah.
Maybe we can do like a little case study. Just imagine you would lead a church in Germany with the average age of 55, and you too would join that church. What would be some of the maybe advice or thoughts? Let's say someone listens to this and says, okay, I would love to do this. I'm in. I understand. I've seen the statistics, and I felt the heart, and we need to reach our young people, but we don't have them yet. Where do we start? I mean, we can't give you a solution, like a full solution, but maybe some thoughts. How would you encourage maybe someone that would love to start in that direction, but currently maybe faces a different reality? How could they start maybe in empowering young people a bit more? Anything maybe that comes to mind?
Actually, it is really simple. It's the easiest thing to do. I mean, okay, if you're in a church and the average age is 55, I assume that you do have some children, some teenagers, some children, because there's some parents in the church. And so a couple of years ago, my oldest son was 9 years old. And I had a meeting with Pastor Howe, and the meeting was about something totally different. And he said, hey, Chris, your son, Kohan, is he serving in church? And I'm like, yeah, in children's church, he's an usher. He said, no, he needs to be in the main church. He is a second-generation Christian, and we need to win him early. He needs to be won to the church before social media wins him, before, Spotify and YouTube wins him. And 2 weeks later, and I'm almost going to cry when I say this, 2 weeks later, he was the photographer. This 9-year-old, he had a camera, it's like 1,000 euros, taking photos, don't drop it. And I was preaching, he was taking photos. And after the service, they did an evaluation, and they asked him, what was your favorite moment in church today? And I thought he's going to say, taking pictures of his daddy. Yeah. He said, my favorite moment was when there was an altar call and I could take a photo of a person that wanted to be saved.
Wow.
And that involvement, it just captured something in his heart. He understood what church is all about. He understood that it's about life and death, eternal life. And there's a principle here. We always say, you got to invite, involve, and include the young people. And everybody can do that. You see, we always think if the young people want to serve, they will come to me and they will tell me they want to serve. But young people, they're shy. They're just growing up. So we need to invite them, involve them, include them. That's what happened to my son.
Yeah.
Hey, you can have this camera, and this is how it works. You turn it around here, this is the light, and here, this is where you press. He was invited to be part of it. And I believe that any church in Germany, you have opportunities to involve the young people. So it's not rocket science. Yeah. It's easy. And then that's when they become, wow, I'm important in church. What I do counts. And then they tell their friends, hey, come to my church. They have cool stuff. They have a drum set. They have electric guitar. In school, they tell us don't touch. In church, they encourage us to touch. Yeah. And so yeah, I would say, I don't know whether you have anything to add here, but...
You see, for me, I think the secret weapon of the older people is that usually for every young person, the favorite person in the family is the grandpa and the grandma. You see, if your mom and dad tells you something, you'll be like, maybe I'll think about it. But when grandpa or grandma appears, you'll be like, I love going to their house. I love hanging out with them because I get extra pocket money. I get extra things that my parents say no to. So being older has its benefits, because if you tell your young kid, my birthday wish for this year is you would go with me to a special place. And then the young person is like, where's this special place? It could be somewhere that, I usually go to every single week. And if you say my wish is you will come with me to church once a year only, I think that young person would likely say yes, because that's the special magic that grandparents have over their kids. And, the thing is that more than just personal relationships around for the older people, I think one great thing that the older people have is they have great wisdom and they have great experiences. You see, many young people, honestly, when we speak to the young people today, they're looking for someone to learn from or someone to simply ask questions that will not judge them for the questions that they have. And when we talk to many of the older people, that at least what we have in Singapore, when you go to them, most of them are very willing to share out of their experiences, but nobody wants to listen to them sometimes. So if you're an older person, you could be a successful business person, you could have retired 10 years ago, but you have interesting stories that many of the young people would be interested to know. So just share out of that wisdom, share out the experience. You might not even know them, but if they're willing to talk to you, I think that's a good starting point. Yeah, because with the older people, you always have interesting stories that the young people have never heard of. So I think that's a good starting place to go to. So in our church, one thing that we do is we have business talks. And in the business talks, we actually invite the professionals in different areas, and they will come and give advice to university students that are trying to go into different courses. So it's kind of like a little open house, and they will meet a real professional doctor and they'll ask them, what's your life like? What are you doing now as a doctor? So if I'm considering a medicine course, I know it pays me well, but do I want that life? So I get to interview a real professional. Or there was another person that was interesting. He's actually a fighter pilot in our church. And you would think a fighter pilot, how do you get deployed and you get involved in the church? So he had an interesting hobby. His hobby was wine tasting. So one day we told him, hey, why don't you serve in the church, and we're going to open a workshop and we're going to do wine appreciation only for non-believers. So he said, hey, out of my schedule, I can have one day for that. And he started to serve in church because of the wine appreciation workshop. And out of that, he saw, hey, church has a place for me. And many people actually came, and people actually started to attend church after wine appreciation.
Yes.
So we said, this is the Jesus miracle. Water can turn into wine. Come and see the miracle in church.
It's just being creative maybe sometimes.
Yes, that's right.
So fixed in our routines. So that sounds to me like it's also okay to fail and to take risk with people.
Yes.
So, I sometimes feel like someone needs to be almost perfect in order to be on stage. But, getting a 9-year-old involved in the camera team, of course, he doesn't do everything right, like someone who studied photography.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal if he kind of makes a mistake or fails, but because it's more about the heart. That's what I'm hearing.
The entire atmosphere is very encouraging. So we are not judgy. It's okay to fail. And of course, photography, even if you don't take the nicest photos, what is at stake? Nothing much, right? Just and we have many photographers. And when you come to our church, at first sight, you might think like, wow, these people, they must be so, so vain because there's so many photographers. But no, we are creating opportunities for young people to serve. It's not about being vain. It's an opportunity for young people to serve. And we always make sure that we set young people up for success.
Right.
So, of course, photography, very little risk of getting anything wrong. But like when people lead worship for the first time, play on a worship team for the first time, we coach them, we train them, and we make sure their very first time serving, it's a success. We ensure that. But it's a very faith-filled atmosphere, right? The young people see the other young people do things, so everybody feels like, I can do this.
And we saw that even last week. I love the way that you encouraged like people and even like people that are serving. And I just note like you see often much more than people think that you see, don't you, when you go somewhere? And I notice it again and again, people appreciating different people within the conference last week. So I love that this is your heartbeat to add value to people wherever they are. Maybe a last topic to maybe open up is discipleship. One of the sessions was around discipleship and the pipeline of discipleship. Could you maybe speak into that a little bit? How does it look like for someone to join the church and start a journey of discipleship? Any thoughts that you want to share?
I think discipleship comes in many forms and many ways. So if you're talking about discipling somebody in their character, in what the Bible says and all of that, in our church, we do have a formalized kind of training. Your Bible studies, you have things that, in fact, in our church, we call it the development tracks. So you have your life skills, you have your Bible studies, you have your leadership. So you have different kinds of tracks. But one of the things that we really believe in is one-on-one discipleship, where it's almost like in the Bible, you read that Jesus will be walking along with his disciples and he will be like telling them things. So we believe in living life together with the group that we lead and with our pastors as well. And as we live life together, we will be discipled in the way that life is like, in the way that we see things. So we always say discipleship is also about alignment. So we would share with the people we lead, hey, this is what I think about the situation. This is going on right now, but these are my thoughts. These are my feelings. What do you think? And in that talks, one-on-one, we get discipled in how our leaders think about things as well. So we do this with our pastors. And if you notice, everywhere we go, we travel in big groups. Heart of God Church doesn't come in one or two people. We're always a tribe. So we bring people along because we are also trying to disciple new and younger people about this is how we do life. This is how Heart of God Church is like where we go. And, I remember this story where there was once I was going overseas. I was probably about 19 or 20 years old. And I was on a trip with our pastors. And then when we entered the airport, the first thing that Pastor Howe did was he brought a group of us. He went to the bookstore and then he just said, look at the top sellers in the bookstore. So all of us were looking like, oh, okay, it's this thing. And then we didn't see anything about it. We're like, okay, interesting titles. But then Pastor Howe said, you can tell a lot about the culture by the top sellers in the bookstore because you know what people are interested in. So we noticed in that culture, there were a lot of books that were fictional. There was nothing serious. There was no business thing. Then they were like, the people here probably, they can't take things too seriously. They like more stories and novels. And I started to notice that when I go to different airport nowadays. So, as I grow older, I'll go into a different airport and then I'll see what are the books that they're selling. And I understand the culture and the people a little bit more. So that was a form of discipleship. But, in church, they wouldn't call it discipleship. But for us, we see as that's how I understand what my pastors look out for. How is it that I can look at things as well? So that's for us.
Just maybe one quick question. So would that happen then in small groups? Or
yes.
Like what are those circles? Because I guess 5,000 people, it's impossible for the pastors to one-on-ones with all of them. So
yes.
The system behind it would be...
So we have small groups. Yeah. So basically, I would say our entire church, you would be part of a small group and you have a small group leader. So everyone disciples everybody that's under them. So just now at the start, we mentioned that our church has 7 generations now. In every generation, you have small groups, you have leaders and a structure behind that. But we are always training and discipling new and younger people as well. So I would say that right now, Pastor Hai and Pastor Lee cannot disciple 5,000 people, but they will try to disciple whoever that's around them. And then those people will disciple the people under them. So it's constantly going on all the time. Yeah.
So what would happen, for example, is like our university pastors, they will say, hey, Pastor Hao, Pastor Leah, do you have time? I have like 10 people that are quite new in church, but they love our church. They seem like potential leader material. would you mind meeting them? So Pastor Hao and Pastor Lee, our senior pastors, very regularly meet the newer people in the church, and very often the question will always be, what is your dream? And the young people will share their dreams with them. And that helps us, because in our church, we always say we want to make the dreams of others come to pass. So this guy dreams to be a leader. Okay, so we can do that. And I think when you ask people about their dreams, you also get to know them. What is important to them? How do they see the future? And, sometimes you can also speak into that, because that's discipleship, right? Like adjusting, guiding the value systems. So that's something that happens like all the time in our church, and all the leaders are trained to do that as well.
Well,
so I think to add on, with all of this, you have your discipleship and your character, your lifestyle and all of that. But then when it comes to skills and abilities like the worship team, you need to have abilities. So that's where in our church, we do have a training school in different areas of the church. And one of the philosophies we have is we want a deep bench. And deep bench is actually a sports term, where if you watch any sports, you basically want your reserve players to be as strong as your first team. So we believe that it's not just going to be one team on the worship team or on the media team, but we want to aim to at least have 2 to 3 teams in the church. So what does it take? I remember many years ago, when our worship team was kind of a little bit better, we had an opportunity to decide, should we cut an album or what should we do? Because they're kind of good right now. So Pastor Leah is also our worship pastor. So we had a meeting. And I remember in that meeting, Pastor Leah was saying that, hey, they might be good enough now, but I think it's more important to train up another generation of musicians, because what's more important is the main team doesn't feel burnout, and they're not going to be the only team serving all the time. So Pastor Leah made a decision, let's not cut any album, but let's go down and train the next batch of musicians. So we basically spent the next 5 to 6 years not doing anything impressive like cutting an album, but we went back to what's important in our church, which is to train new and younger musicians. So the good news is that today on our church, we probably have about 4 to 5 strong teams that would play a regular weekend. And your main team or our best musicians, they get to rest every single month. They get time to recreate in their music, and it keeps them fresh every time they serve. So that keeps a pipeline of leaders coming up and a deep bench. And this is replicated across all the different departments as well. Yeah.
This is sounds very healthy to, not just pull as much out of a team as you can, but actually to think long term and how we can multiply ourselves. I heard someone say a lot of churches are growing and not many churches are multiplying.
Oh, that's good.
You can grow, but it doesn't mean you're multiplying. You know? So I think the intentionality behind that is so inspiring, and we've been learning so much from you guys. And just to finish off with, if someone wants to get in touch or maybe hear some more, obviously we're going to link the book, which is a great starting point. There are next year, I think they've planned almost like a learning community or something. Do you know any more details about that? Maybe we can get afterwards, but just...
Yes. So very briefly, we are next year, 2025 and 2026, we're going to have 4 events, 3-day events where we do a generations implementation community. Basically, we want to come alongside the churches here in Germany and basically help them to implement what we call generations. And we basically have 3 outcomes that we would like to help with. And one of them is, of course, church growth. We've learned so many different ways to reach out and how to create an environment where non-Christians feel welcome, they can come. So church growth is one. Another one is revival. How do you get your young people to have a revival, a personal revival relationship with Jesus, and to have that I'm all sold out for the cause of Christ? And then the third outcome would be so that you can achieve buy-in from the rest of your church, because maybe some people will be very worried when you say, hey, we want to all win the young generation. Now then, what about us, not so young people? So that's where we want to help. And I think we can probably put the link for more information on this in the show notes. And hey, I also would like, if I can, and otherwise you just cut this part. We every year we have a generations pastors conference in Singapore in our church, and we will also put that the link in the show notes. It's a life-changing experience. Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes.
We will come.
A lot of leaders and pastors say, we read the book, but you just cannot imagine. Only when you come, then you realize what is actually going on here. And it's a very refreshing experience. And I would love for more Germans to come. Then ich kann mein Deutsch praktizieren. Und yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much, guys. It's been really nice talking to you.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to come next year.
Yes.
And to learn more from you guys and to implement it here in our context. And maybe for the last few seconds I speak in German.
Yes.
Danke, dass ihr mit dabei wart. Und wenn ihr einfach mit mehr davon wissen wollt, schaut in die Shownotes. Es ist wirklich etwas, was uns, glaube ich, total weiterbringt als Kirche in Deutschland. Vielleicht kannst du es auch teilen mit jemandem, das Buch zusammen lesen. Ich glaube, das hat uns total geholfen und wird euch bestimmt auch helfen. Deswegen schreibt uns gerne euer Feedback, auch Fragen, die ihr vielleicht noch dazu habt. Wir versuchen euch das meiste zu verlinken in den Shownotes. Aber es ist Hammer, mit euch gemeinsam unterwegs zu sein, und wir wollen die nächste Generation erreichen und freisetzen, einen Unterschied zu machen in dieser Generation, und wir glauben ganz fest daran, dass das ein Riesenschlüssel sein kann von dem, was wir heute gehört haben. Deswegen danke euch nochmal, thank you again so much.
Thank you, danke.
Und wir sehen uns beim nächsten Mal. Bis dann.